So a little bit more light. Bang. So hi. This video is going to take us through our February stats for basically everything in 2020. So our solar PV, our Tesla Powerwall, our myenergi components, and our 2 EVs. So without further ado, let's run the intro and I'll see you in a bit. Hi, John here. As I said in the intro, I'm going to walk you through our performance for our Tesla Powerwall 2, our 6 kilowatt solar PV system, our myenergi Zappi and eddi, and the Tesla Model 3 and the Hyundai Kona, and all for the month of February 2020. I've actually listed all the components in the specifications down in the description below. So if you're a regular, then most of you know what our setup is all about anyway. But if you are new here, well, firstly, welcome. And if it's of interest to you, then say have a ganders down below in the description, and that will give you all the information, hopefully, that you need. There are sort of 1 or 2 minor frustrations during the month of February, which is why I'm actually not uploaded very much onto the channel for the past 3 weeks or so. I've just got over quite a nasty cough and cold, which meant I didn't feel like filming, but more importantly I couldn't, because I couldn't talk, which is probably a good thing. And I also just recently tripped over the charging cable from the Zappi when I was plugging it into the car. So you can have a look at that. Yeah, so as you see there, not good, but video proof that EVs can actually be hazardous to your health. I'm a bit more careful now when I unroll and walk with that cable to plug it into the car. But I went down with a bit of a bang and jarred my wrist and what have you. So again, I couldn't use a camera really for 3 or 4 days while that healed up, because it was quite painful to hold anything that was fairly heavy. Also, just to top off this before we get into the nitty gritty, we had a couple of issues or problems with the myenergi devices. Firstly, the eddi and the Zappi weren't making use of the excess solar. And when I noticed this, I raised the fault towards the end of February with myenergi, and they were very quick, in fairness, to getting back to me. I recorded a video of what was happening, so I'll bring that up on screen so you can have a look at that. But our eddi, which was is set as the master, was not actually diverting the excess solar to heat the hot water, and the Zappi also wasn't working on Eco++ mode, which again should have been diverting excess solar into the car. And this clip shows that the excess solar is just sending straight out to the grid. And this sequence runs for about 2 minutes in total before I manually intervened and diverted it. And what it turned out to be was that the eddi was configured for the battery storage, because we've got the Tesla Powerwall installed in the setup as well. And it was set to avoid both, which means to avoid drain and also to avoid charge. And myenergi suggested changing it to just avoid drain. And once I did this, the next time we had sunshine, the eddi and Zappi worked perfectly. However, it still seems to be a bit intermittent in terms of that automated cutover and diverting the excess solar. So I've been sort of babysitting it and keeping an eye on it, and may have to do a follow-up on that. So it doesn't seem to work every time, all the time. But yeah, so we're not out of the woods yet on that one. And then the second problem we had with the eddi and Zappi happened on the leap year, 29th of February, which is yesterday. Today is the 1st of March, the day I'm recording this video. When I went to think, I must remember to do the month-end recordings for the Zappi and the eddi so I can bring them into my data. And I then noticed a tweet from Nigel at Kona Electric. and he was highlighting an issue with the data. My display screens on both devices were showing that it was the 1st of March, where in reality it was the 29th of Feb. So I raised a bug report with myenergi on their forum, and they were very quick to respond. And they basically said they'd made a mistake in the library. They said there was a bug in the library, which sounds like something out of Cluedo, those that remember it. And that deals with what's actually displayed on screen. So the data was actually being recorded on the back end and into the server, but it wasn't showing correctly on the screen. So yesterday it was showing the 1st of March, and today it's showing the 1st of March. So hopefully tomorrow it'll be the 2nd of March. But what it did mean was that there was basically no data. I couldn't pull up any data when I went to the screens, so I was unable to pull up any of the month-end data. It just said no data available. So thankfully I did actually record the data on the 28th of February. So I do have some month-end data, which is only a day out, and it's not really that different. But yeah, so it's one to watch out for if you have a similar setup and haven't noticed that that's an issue. So let's get into the nitty-gritty, into the spreadsheet. As always, that spreadsheet is on the Dropbox, and again down below is a link to where it is. So if you're interested in having a look at that in a little bit more detail, then you know where to grab it from. So our first tab to look at is our PV and Tesla month on month, which tracks the solar performance and the performance of the Powerwall in terms of self-power and what have you. So in February 2020, we generated 384 kilowatts, which actually is a great improvement over January, which was 241. You notice the difference in the longer daylight hours, the higher sun position relative to the panels on the roof. It really improves the efficiency of the system. It starts charging earlier, finishes charging later in the day, and it is more powerful as a result of that in terms of the generation through the day. And in fact, I saw our first 6 kilowatt generation value showing on the Tesla Powerwall app, which was actually really, really exciting. This is the first time I've seen it since October when it was installed. If we look at that total figure, that 384 figure, and split it down, if you remember, we've got two systems. So let's have a look at each one individually. Our 4 kilowatt array, which is our older array, that generated 241 kilowatts in February, and our new 2.2 array generated 143 kilowatts in that month. And what that means is that the smaller array generated 59% of the energy of the larger system, which spookily is exactly the same size in terms of difference between the two. So the smaller one is 59% the size of the larger one. So that's all going well in terms of the efficiency of those two systems. If we look at the daily average, there is 13.2 kilowatts per day, and this is actually a great figure, as in 2019 we had really super month in February, and I wasn't sure whether we'll actually beat it with even with additional solar panels. And if we look at February 2019, it was 314 kilowatt hours and an average of 11.2. So yeah, it is actually a better average over the year on year, as it were, for February 2019 against February 2020. So well done for February 2020. So let's scroll down a bit and have a look at our next chart. So this chart looks at our Powerwall and solar contribution to our self-power. We have our Powerwall configured to cost-saving mode, which means that it targets drawing power from the grid and to charge the battery during our off-peak period. And that's between 12:30 in the morning and 4:30 in the morning, when our electricity cost is 5 pence per unit. The solar and Powerwall then run the house during the peak times, which is when our electricity is around 15 pence per unit. So the Powerwall its primary goal is cost saving, and then self-power then becomes a secondary consideration. So I guess what I'm saying is we're unlikely to be self-powering the house when the electricity is cheap, and it's more likely to ensure that the Powerwall is fully charged and pulling from the grid at that point. I've been thinking that now we're getting into March, I'll probably be swapping from cost saving back to self-power mode once we have more daylight to play with. So in February, we were self-powered for 48% of the month. The split, as you can see there, was 16% supplied by solar panel and 32% from the Powerwall. And this is interesting because in Feb 2019, the Powerwall would have been on self-power mode. And as you can see from the graph, the percentage of self-power was much higher at 58%. However, note also that there was much more sunshine, almost twice as much from the solar panels compared to Feb 2020. To understand that better, we also need to look back at our house energy consumption for Feb 2019 to put that into perspective. And that'll put that 58% self-power into perspective. Because if we look at our house usage, we used 557 kilowatts in Feb 2019 versus 1,273 kilowatts in Feb 2020, which is a 52% increase in our electricity usage at home. So yeah, you can understand why the difference in the values there. So let's scroll down again. So this looks at the Powerwall split for self-power between peak and off-peak times. We would expect to see a higher percentage figure during the peak time, which is shown in red, and next to nothing during the off-peak time, which is shown in green. Well, it would do if there was any values in there. If you look at September last year and a bit in October, you'll see there's a smidgen of green there at the top. So as you can see, in the past 4 months, we've consistently been targeting self-power during our peak period, with no self-power during the off-peak period. I suspect that will change as we get more and more sunshine, even if I keep the Powerwall on cost-saving mode. Why do I say that? Well, I've been noticing that, and this has sort of been collaborated by fellow Powerwall owners with the same configuration as me, but the amount of electricity pulled during the off-peak times is actually changing, and it's reducing quite significantly. So in December, January and early February, the Powerwall would consistently charge to full every night during the off-peak time slot. However, in the past few days, it's now taking around 5 kilowatts as opposed to the 14 kilowatts to fully charge, which works out at 5 kilowatts is around 30% charge rather than a 30% full, as it were. So yeah, it is actually cutting back on how much it's pulling from the grid because there's more daylight and consequently more sunshine. So yeah, interesting, keep our eye on that. So let's move on and have a look at the year-on-year tab. I actually love this chart. These track the monthly totals over the lifetime that we've had the solar installation. So in this case, it's from Feb 2012 through to Feb 2020. As I mentioned before, that Feb 2019 figure was a really good month for solar. And you can see clearly here, it's miles above any of the other years by some country mile at 314 kilowatt hours. And if we look at Feb 2020, then it looks like we've actually smashed it. But remember, this is including the new panels that we didn't have in Feb 2019. So it really actually masks the actual figure. So if you compare us or like for like, it shows a really different story. The new panels generated 143 kilowatts in Feb 2020. And if we take that away from our total, it brings us down to a new total of 241 kilowatts. Which means that Feb 2019 still beat Feb 2020 in terms of like-for-like performance on the 4K array. That's how good Feb 2019 was. And as I said earlier, that's why I love these charts. It really allows you to see the trends in the data rather than just looking at one-off data set, which can lead you down a bit of a rabbit hole if you're not careful. Okay, so let's move on and look at the Powerwall in and out. So this tab looks at our Powerwall in and out over the month. We have pushed 418 kilowatts to the Powerwall and extracted 371 kilowatts. That makes a round trip efficiency of 89%, which is in line with Tesla's rating of 92.5% in their round trip efficiency. So yeah, happy with that. Not much more I can really say on that. This chart shows our daily house usage in blue, so what we've actually consumed in kilowatts. In yellow is our solar generation. Our export to the grid is shown in orange, and what we've pulled from the grid is shown in red. It's worth noting that we don't record how much we pull from the grid during the peak and off-peak, so I don't split that down to be able to understand what's pulled during peak and what's pulled off-peak. However, it is fair to say that we maximise the time slot of off-peak by setting things on timers and stuff like that. So we know that majority of the things like the car charging, the kilns going on, the washing machine, the dishwasher, all those kind of things are all set on timers to come on between that 12:30 and 4:30. So the majority of the usage from the grid is during off-peak at 5 pence per unit. I could actually work it out if I wanted to. I can just go on to the Octopus Energy's website and onto my account, and it will bring up a day-by-day, half-hourly time slot of energy usage. It's fairly straightforward on that tab in terms of usage. You can see some high days of usage with a big import from the grid and a fairly consistent solar PV generation over the course of the month. Quite a few days over 20 kilowatts, most days over 10, and only a few days where it was very, very poor solar generation. So all in all, a really good month. Let's move on and look at the average grid usage. So this chart looks at our daily average home usage and also what we pulled from the grid on average each day over the course of the month. The home usage is high for this month at 43.9 or almost 44 kilowatts on average each day, whereas actually what we pulled from the grid is lower at 33.1 each day over the course of the month. I guess the sort of key dates on that overall timeline for over the year would be July, when we got the Kona and started to charge that at home, and then the end of September where we got the Tesla, and then sort of midsummer we got the 2 electric glass kilns. So you can see the usage going up there over those later months of the year. But it's interesting to notice the difference between what the house has used and actually what we pulled from the grid, meaning that the gap is now being picked up by the solar and the Powerwall. So that's that one. The next one to have a look at is the monthly grid usage. So this first chart looks at the amount of generation that was sent back to the grid. So in February it was 25 kilowatts over the month, which works out about 800 watts per day. So ideally I'd like it to be nothing, but picking up on the issue we had with the myenergi devices not picking up on the export, would obviously understand why for most of February we were sending more back to the grid than we perhaps should have been. If we look at the next chart, that's what we pulled from the grid. So we've pulled 960 kilowatts for the month, which, considering the amount of house usage, we did actually quite well by not pulling too much from the grid. So I'm really pleased with that over the winter months. It's now starting to come down again, and we should see that tracking down now over the forthcoming months, hopefully. So this is the eddi. What's happened with our eddi? So over the course of the month, We have diverted 10 kilowatts to heat our hot water from surplus solar. And obviously, as mentioned previously, it wasn't picking up on all of the excess, so it would have been higher. Gives us a running total for the year of 13.3 kilowatts with an overall total or running total since installation of 86 kilowatts. Okay, so move on to our last tab. This is the Zappi tab. This tracks our charging for our Kona and our Tesla. This extra data was requested by a subscriber, so I've added more information or more detail here so you can show basically how much it costs to run both of the cars each month. So let's have a look at those in turn. Firstly, looking at the Tesla, that's done 443 miles in the month. We've added 229.7 kilowatt hours was added through home charging. And all that would have been at 5 pence per kilowatt. So that works out at £10.46. And we also added 20 kilowatts of surplus through green energy as well. So I've already taken that off and excluded that from the total in terms of the costings, because obviously that was free. We did some public charging as well with the Tesla. We added 26.66 kilowatts from 3 separate charging events. And each of one of those was at no cost, which was nice. So it means that the total cost per mile for the Tesla was 2 pence a mile for those 443 miles, which is just crazy money. I had to work it out like 3 or 4 times just to make sure it was right. So yeah. The Kona, by comparison, has done more miles. It's done 731 miles during the month. We've added more power to it at home charging as a result. So we've added 404 kilowatt hours. And again, that's still at 5 pence per unit because we target that to charge during our off-peak period. And that works out at £19.18 to charge the car. And again, we had 20 kilowatts of green energy added from the solar array. So I have taken that off as well. I haven't included that in the figure. We also did public charging. We had 3 public charging events, which cost £13.54, where we added 48 kilowatts into the car. So that makes it a little bit more expensive to run at the cost of 4 pence per mile for those 733 miles. So hopefully that helps, just give some indication of how efficient it is to run an electric car if you can charge at home and also if you have solar power. I suspect that will get cheaper still as we get more and more solar generation to offset the use of the off-peak 5 pence rate. So there we go. That's it for our February 2020. That's all boxed off and in the bag, so to speak. If you've got any questions, then just jot them down below in the comments and I'll pick them up and respond to them. Anything you've noticed, anything I've missed, all those kind of good things. And until next time, I shall see you on the next one. All right, take care. Bye.